Let's keep it simple. Hey guys, a little change of venue here. We're going to go and work in the sunshine in the kitchen here. Next step, no more Mr. Nice Guy. This next part is important. I'm not going to fluff with too much external stuff here. By the way, thank you for showing up. Thanks for the wait. Don't forget to smash like, subscribe. You guys know the spiel. The next part is going to address covert contracts, and that's of all the things that married guys do when they first come and they first get their map and they first start working on the red pilling of themselves, the first thing that they find sabotages them are covert contracts. Now, some of them are easy. I mean, everybody says the same lip service that, I'm doing this for me. But when you actually map it to people's behaviors, you find it tends to be just loaded with them. And a lot of the time, guys don't even know they're doing them. So I figured we go through this with a little bit of a fine-tooth comb. So making your needs a priority. Glover starts it with, I want you to know I'm really uncomfortable with that thing we talked about last week. Lars, an anxiety-filled executive, began his second session of counseling with this statement. He come to see me on the encouragement of his wife. He reported being generally depressed and unhappy for as long as he could remember. In recent months, he had found it difficult to sleep at night and was experiencing migraine headaches on a regular basis. Even though everything in his life seemed to be fine, good job, nice home, family, he never seemed to be happy. Now, side note on this one, if you'll notice, most of the guys, when they talk about their happiness and everything is good, and then explain the things that are important to them, you're going to notice a predominance of beta traits that tend to be on par while the guy's not happy. Not sure why, not sure what it is, but in general, most guys' relationship problems don't stem from a lack of beta behaviors. It's mostly alpha behaviors. So for a lot of guys, a lot of what you have to do is just add your desirability, increasing your sexual market value, or just having more displays of higher value and the things that come with it. That's the working out, that's the being social, that's the being charismatic, even as far as catch and release and beyond. These kind of things tend to help sort them out. Now, I'm not going to sit here and give you some Evo Psych reason why that's the case. Just know that it's there and know that it's common. And in general, the first steps you can take tend to be increasing the alpha behaviors in your life, which the one thing that you can talk to just about anybody with that will all agree is about working out. So lifting heavy weights and eating good is a no-brainer on this part. So in his first counseling session, Lars revealed that he had constant fantasies of chucking it all away and disappearing to somewhere else in the world. If that makes it sound like those guys that want to be digital nomads, that want to leave the office and become entrepreneurs, well, yeah. This is why a lot of that entrepreneur Twitter is full of platitudes, because people don't really want to be an entrepreneur. They don't want the risks that come with it. They don't want to start their own business. They generally want that feeling of desperation, and they want it kind of validated. And that's where the platitudes come in. You hear these great stories. Yeah, 6 figures after 6 months. You just got to hustle, bro. And everybody gets a good tingly feeling in their body. Then they go back to their horrible, tragic relationships and lives, which are essentially self-inflicted. So, moving on. For the rest of the session, I shared with him the importance of making his needs a priority and taking responsibility for finding ways to meet them. And this is where we move on to the next part, where he talks about low maintenance kind of guys. And Lars is fairly typical when it comes to his needs. He meets everybody else's needs while trying to be low maintenance kind of guy. When I talk to them about making their needs a priority, there was similar response to Lars. So he notices a pattern to it. And in this case, it's trying to appear needless and wantless. If that sounds like stoicism, well, you'd be right. It's kind of 2 types of stoicism. There's the stoicism that you read, which is closer to the serenity player. If you haven't heard of that, it's God, give me the strength to change the things I can and the fortitude to endure the things I can't and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's essentially stoicism in a nutshell. Changing what you can, deliberate action, and not wasting your time on things you can't alter. But in this case, stoicism represents this low maintenance kind of nice guy where they just try to be without want. You're going to see it manifested a lot among married guys when they talk about how their wife chews them out or all kinds of crappy behavior, or girlfriend does this. And everybody treats them like trash, and they sat there and they took it. For some reason, guys seem to think being a punching bag is being able to take 9 rounds without flinching, like the Homer Simpson boxing thing. And it's very, very clear when a guy's talking, because on his field reports, he will tell you about how bad it is, how much stuff he's putting up with, and he'll always use words like, and I just responded calmly. They always say they responded calmly or stoically. It's a dead giveaway when somebody uses an adjective like that they're seething inside, but they're trying to pretend to be low maintenance. They also make it difficult for others to give to them, and covert contracts. But we're going to put a pin in that because covert contracts take a majority of this, episode, and we're going to go over them in depth later on in it. The next thing is trying to appear needless and wantless, preventing nice guys from getting their needs met. So for nice guys, trying to become needless and wantless was a primary way of trying to cope with their childhood abandonment experiences. If you don't know what this is talking about, you're catching it a little bit late. Go back to episodes 2 and 3, or mostly episode 2, where they talk about how essentially childhood formative experiences when it comes to abandonment based on ego are what create a lot of these nice guy behaviors. Being how most of us are most likely millennials coming from the greatest divorce generation in history, it makes sense that it would be an uptick in this anyways. So these little helpless boys concluded that if they could eliminate or hide all their needs, then no one would abandon them. It's because, you don't ask, you don't get disappointed. They also convinced themselves that if they didn't have needs, it wouldn't hurt so bad when needs weren't met. Again, it's kind of like a weird inversion of you can't fire me, I quit. It's like, well, I never even showed up to work, so you can't fire me. It's very weird. So this creates an unsolvable bind. These helpless little boys could not repress their needs and stay alive, and they could not meet the needs on their own. Their only logical solution was to try and appear needless and wantless while trying to get needs met in indirect and covert ways. Again, it all leads to covert contracts, or the nice guy paradigm, where if I do what I think she wants me to do, then she will love me in the way that I want, and my life will be problem-free. If I repeat that a lot, it's because it's probably the most important phrase in this book. If you can truly understand the depth behind it, then you're well on your way to never being in these situations, or if you are in these situations, to get rid of it. Moving on here. So there's a breaking free exercise. I cannot stress how important the breaking free exercises are. Not so much for the sake that he mentions it in here, but a lot of times the guys lack self-reflection. And this is why we ego invest. We shed a lot of the things that we think are unattractive, but really are. But we lie to ourselves. So just the simple act of writing this down or talking to somebody who's dispassionate towards it can really help you clarify your thoughts. And if the other person is good at what they do, which I would argue close male friends would be good for this. Marriage counselors, definitely not. Pastors, it doesn't seem that way at all. But, I haven't seen one in 20, 30 years. So you'll have to check with your own parish. But the kind of person who doesn't just try to make you feel better, but calls you out on your BS is very important here. Again, Huey McGill, one of the married red pill guys, has been a moderator for longer than I have. He has a No More Mr. Nice Guy subreddit on Reddit. So if you don't have anybody to do these with, it's really good. Come down there, tell him I sent you, and run through your breaking free stuff. So it's pretty cool. So we're going to go into the next part here in covert contracts. Look at this. Love how busy it is in the chat here. Always happy to see Chesty in here. Using covert contracts prevents nice guys from getting their needs met. So nice guys are faced with a dilemma. How can they keep the fact that they have hidden needs, yet still create situations in which they have some hope of getting their needs met? In order to accomplish this impossible goal, they utilize covert contracts. These are unconscious, unspoken agreements, and the primary way that nice guys interact with the world around them. Almost everything a nice guy does is a manifestation of a covert contract. So it's simply this. I will do X for you so that you will do X for me, and we will both act as if we have no awareness of this contract. So I'm going to map this to a couple very easy examples that I'm sure everybody knows. Everybody here, I hope, has at least been on a date. And if you weren't good at a date, what you would do is try to be a girl's friend first. Act very friendly, act non-threatening, act non-sexual, with the hopes that, again, I will do this friendship thing for you so that you will provide sexual reward for me, and we will both act if there's no awareness of this contract. You can even see it on Twitter where some guy is white knighting for some chick. And that's why, like I said, the powerful statement behind that is I hope she sees this, bro, because it automatically ruins part 3, that everybody's acting as if they have no awareness of this contract. You're calling out that the guy is perfectly aware of what he's doing. And it doesn't even matter. Sometimes the guy doesn't even want the girl to sleep with him, or it's like online, you'll never meet her, whatever. But you're running off of instinct. So most of the time, guys don't know they do it. It's just their natural method of doing things. It's their mental model. It's limbic brain. They don't even give it a second thought, which is problematic because you're being disingenuous with your needs and desires. I mean, let's face it. If you're on a date with somebody, the first thing you want to do is you want to smash. And if you're not smashing, then why are you there? You've never taken a friend on a date to have a buddy that you go play football with on the weekends. Never. It just doesn't happen. So pretending that it's not the case, or a lot of guys like, well, I'm looking for a wife. It's like, slow down. Right now, you need to find somebody who's equally invested in the relationship as you, as well as checking to make sure that they respect your boundaries or that you even know what your boundaries are. So a little premature for looking for a wife. Glover goes on to say, most of us have had the experience of leaning over and whispering in our lover's ear, I love you. We then wait expectantly for our beloved to respond with, I love you too. This is a perfect example of a covert contract in which a person gives to get. Giving I love yous get I love you twos. And it's returned the basic way nice guys try to go about getting your needs met. And anybody here who's got a girlfriend, had one, wife, whatever, partner, spouse, husband, whatever, I don't judge, will at some point have noticed that their girl kind of throws out a compliment on them with really expectations that we throw one back. It's something that kind of, once you understand it, you can't not see it anymore. It's these covert contracts are essentially men acting like defective women. Women do this covert stuff all the time. They completely talk through subtext and innuendo. So they aren't good at receiving it, but they're great at giving it. Now, the question is, if a girl's doing a covert contract to you, do you respond? Like if she says, I love you with the hopes that you say, I love you back, what do? You drop kick her through the wall? Like, no. Girls are girls. They follow your lead. So don't worry so much about trying to fix a girl and her nice guy behaviors, because girls are nice guys by default. It's kind of what makes them women. And that's kind of what makes guys attractive when they do it. Throwing that out there for you. So caretaking. Caretaking prevents nice guys from getting their needs met. It always consists of 2 parts. Glover talks about focusing on another person's problems, needs, or feelings in order to feel valuable, get one's own needs met, or to avoid dealing with one's own problem and feelings. So I kind of 50-50 on a lot of the stuff that Jordan Peterson was talking about in his messaging, and I'm sure you guys have all heard it over the past couple of years. This is essentially the clean your room. And it's one of the few things that I think Jordan nailed bang on outside of after he kind of left the clinical psychology side of things and started talking about, Jesus and literature and I don't know, whatever else. A lot of people offload their responsibility for the things in their own life that make them unhappy, and they try to fix the world instead. And this is manifested in all kinds of different ways. If you want to look right now in the news, Antifa, Black Lives Matter, fixing the world instead of fixing your problems. Same thing as the married guy who decides to be the best employee ever or run the best business ever instead of fixing his home life or using it to avoid his home life. It's essentially exactly what we talked about in the first episode of this, hiding the evidence or hiding the badness. It's no different than a kid who, accidentally pokes a hole through the dining room table and then puts a flower pot over it so mom doesn't find out. It's that same manifestation. And a lot of times just being ashamed of your own stuff and not taking responsibility for it is what causes these behaviors. And that's why it's very common. If you've watched Hunter Drew, I guess now his name is Zach, but he always talked about owning your shit. And that's kind of something that came from the married red pill. It was a weekly thread, and it's basically the only thread that's worth seeing in there. And I'm trying to replicate it. We're doing a pretty good job right now in our Patreon in the locker room. A guy has to go in there without ego, lay it all on the table, say what he's doing wrong and what he needs to do. One sec, I'm going to turn off that AC. There we go. Where was I? Oh, yeah. On your shit. So the problem comes in real life. When you're talking with your social circle, when you're talking with your girl, there's always like a subtle power play in effect. Your social circle wants everything even keel. They don't want anybody to act differently. Everything needs to stay the same. Your girl, everything she says and everything she hears is focused through her ego. So it's not a conducive environment for you to drop your ego and have any semblance of vulnerability. This was the purpose of male spaces and camaraderie. Now, I don't mean to make it sound like a testicular cancer meeting from Fight Club if you haven't seen it. That's the part where everybody cries in each other's arms because they all have lost their testicles because of cancer, but they're promising themselves they're real men. That's the perversion of this that way too many people do. I could go right now on to a great example I like for this is a Facebook group called Order of Men. You'll recognize it because it's got like Spartan helmets and axes and leather and cigars and Miller Lite masculinity stuff everywhere. Guys go in there and they complain and they bitch about their wives and they say everything that she's done wrong. They make no effort to see in what ways they've enabled it and what they can do about it. And everybody else is just giving this giant coping strategy. So if you learn nothing else from this, learn that avoiding that is a very good way of being able to make progress and be held accountable. Something to think about there. Truck nuts, exactly, truck nuts. What better symbol of faux masculinity could there be than your Ford F-150, has to be a half ton, with a set of nuts hanging off the back? Or guys that refuse to neuter their dogs when they're living in the city and they let them roam free. So the example he uses here is Reese, a graphic designer in his late 20s, is a good example of the extremes to which nice guys caretake in their intimate relationships. Reese, who's gay, lamented on one of his therapy sessions, "Why can't I find a partner who gives as much back to me as I give to them?" He went on to describe how all of his boyfriends seemed to be takers and he did all the giving. Within a year, he entered into 3 intense relationships. Each began wonderfully and seemed like the partner he'd been looking for. Each failed because of the same scenario. Reese picked men who needed rescuing or fixing. Captain Save-A-Ho to the rescue. It turns out that even if guys swing the other way, it's still the same problems we deal with. So it's good to know it's so universal that your hetero or homosexuality really doesn't matter. The first boyfriend lived in Canada, recently gotten off of drugs. He came to live with Reese, but never applied for a work visa and struggled to stay clean. Reese went out of his way to be supportive and hopes that he would find a better job and stay off of drugs. Finally, Reese sent him home to get his life straightened out. Later, he found out the reason his boyfriend never applied for a work visa is because he was HIV positive. All the stuff he failed to tell Reese. There's a reason that all of us will tell you, like, don't try to save her. She doesn't want to be saved. This guy here, like, it sounds good. Everybody should want to be clean. Everybody should want to be healthy. Everybody should want to live with their boyfriend or wife or girlfriend or what. In this case, his action spoke way clearer. He didn't want to stay clean. He didn't want to have everybody healthy around him that loved him. He didn't want any of that stuff. And so the problem with being Captain Save-A-Ho or trying to save somebody from themselves or picking a fixer-upper is you're essentially opting in to be an enabler. And in this case, a drug dealing enabler, which, I mean, in his example, you can see the consequences. But for married people, the consequences can be, like I said, STDs, financial ruin, child estrangement. Like, there's no shortage of it. And if you want to find out all the what coulds and what ifs and worst case scenarios, go check out any MGTOW or Red Pill brand channel, and I'm sure they'll talk about it incessantly. Every video, all the videos, all the time. It's nice that they focus on that part of it, but, you know, a little bit's enough. Just know it's bad. He goes into a bunch of his other boyfriends here. So the second one was a different race, and never came to grips with his sexuality. His parents and religion kept him in constant conflict. He was never able to commit. Nevertheless, Reese wanted to be supportive and giving, all with the hopes his boyfriend would eventually see things straightened out and become available. Never happened. Third one was in the military, living on a base, no car. Reese had to take the initiative in getting together and would often shuffle his partner around because Reese made more money. He always paid when they went out. He frequently bought the boyfriend gifts and loaned him money. When the boyfriend got transferred to a different state, Reese quit his job, sold his car, and moved along, only to return in 3 months because his partner started running around on him. So in this time, he spent so much time in that year caretaking for other people, he never met his own needs, and he essentially got taken advantage of. Taking advantage of, or taking for granted, is the opposite of, how would I word this? I don't want to say alpha, but yeah, strong boundaries. I guess the opposite of having boundaries is being codependent. And this is strictly codependent. Anybody here in the chat, feel free to chime in. If you've ever had like a girlfriend in that who was going to college in a different state or a different province, they were going to take a job somewhere else and you dropped everything to go with them, usually ends up bad. Feel free to chime in the chat. I'd love to hear you guys' experiences too. But in general, every example I've seen where guys move to accommodate the girl they're with, it usually ends up going badly. And the theory about why this is because girls will act in their own best interests. And if her own best interests involve you, they would have probably turned down this chance to move. I'll give you a personal example. There's this posting in Quebec for naval people. It's in a place called Sept-Îles. Now, if you don't know what Sept-Îles is, that's okay. Nobody knows. It's essentially the furthest east you can go on the continental Canadian country. It's as far east as you can be. It's this small town, 11 blocks in nowhere, Quebec. They do nothing. They have a snowmobile and that's it. Like they have to ship in groceries kind of thing. So there's one posting there, and this girl that was in the school with us, there was me, my friend Max, and her. She ended up getting that posting because she was fluent in French. So was my buddy Max. And she started crying. Oh, I just met a new boyfriend. I want to stay at home. I can't take the posting. She basically tanked her career by going to the Padre and claiming a grievance against the whole thing. So she ended up not getting the posting. So they ended up sending in a last minute notice my buddy Max, who at the time, he and his wife had been together for about a year and they were trying for a baby. He ended up getting sent down there instead. His career went well. His wife ended up moving down there with him, even though it kind of hurt. Like she was college educated. She had a career going in something and she was basically moving to a nowhere town, which would basically put her career on hold. And she ended up doing that. So when you talk about trying to save somebody or you're trying to move to accommodate somebody, usually the girl will do that. And this is why, for the most part, a relationship is a woman's job, because their investment is essentially the relationship's investment. I can't think of a better example than that one there anyways. They're Chesty in the chat, outrage porn. I like it. Next part is the victim triangle. So rather than helping nice guys get their needs met, oh, where's my mouse? There it is. They do covert contracts and caretaking only be led to frustration and resentment. When this frustration and resentment builds, it often spills out in not some pretty ways. Giving to give or giving to get gets a cycle of craziness called the victim triangle, where the nice guy gives others in hopes of getting something in return. Remember the covert contract before. I do X. In response, you'll do Y for me, and then we'll act as if nobody knows what we're doing. And so he gives to others and hoping to get something in return. When it doesn't seem that he's giving as much as he gives or isn't getting what he expected, he feels frustrated and resentful. And then when this frustration and resentment builds up long enough, it spills out in the form of rage attacks, passive-aggressive behavior, pouting, tantrums, withdrawing, shaming, criticizing, blaming, even physical abuse. Once the cycle's been completed, it usually just begins all over again. I talked about it often. The feedback loop of covert contracts is a dangerous thing. You keep asking or you keep giving and hope to get something back. The person doesn't give back, and more often than not, even if they do, it's not to the extent that you would like. And then the guy ends up getting raged out. Weird thing is, he's not so much angry at the other person, he's angry at himself. And he kind of knows this, but ego prevents you from blaming yourself for things. So you always have to project it onto the other person. Great example of this is a married red pill guy running his map. It's a common thing. Chesty will tell you in the chat. There is no shortage of posts where a guy will say, I've been red pilled for 2 2 years. It's always 2 years. Don't ask me why. I've been red-pilled for 2 years. What's a shit test? And then you're like, what? And then you find out from the guy, they all do the same thing. They all work out. They all fix their diet. They all start dressing better. They start reading some game books. And they were doing it all for her. If you remember before when I talked about like a girl wants to get a job in another place, you drop everything and move to be with her, things go sour. And that's because girls don't like the pressure of that responsibility put onto them, because girls fear rejection. And they fear social ostracization or whatever. Having a stumble on that one. So instead of you moving there to be with her, it puts the onus on her. Then this experience has to be good, or it's her fault. Girls can't stand anything being their fault. So what they will do is they'll tend to sabotage the thing. And that is one of the reasons why a lot of the times when a guy's move to be with a girl, 6 months later, she's jumping on some strange. Or in this case, a guy's working out, getting fit, becoming a top tier man to impress his woman. He's building a better mousetrap. And then the girl realizes at some point that this is all about her, and she doesn't like that responsibility. And so it turns her off completely. And this is where things tend to backfire. Now, why it always happens at about 24 months or 2 years, I couldn't tell you. But it's been consistent enough to know. If you're LARPing, you're going to find out in 2 years. As for what you can do about it, again, you just have to be aware of the covert contracts, and you have to quash them instantly. The only techniques or strategies I've found that work for this is just assume your wife is dead. Assume your wife is dead, assume your relationship is dead, and you're moving on. A branch swing, essentially, with an olive branch. Now, if she doesn't count and she's not a factor in any of your decisions, what would you do anyway? And then you do those things that you would do. You're perfectly willing to move on, you're capable, but at the same time, you have a great sparring partner right now. Because if your game is tight enough to attract a person that's known nothing but your BS, nothing but your weaknesses, nothing but your vulnerabilities, nothing but your unattractive behavior for X amount of years, if you can work and game that one, you can easily game people that don't know anything about you and only see that showing of what you give them. So it's good to have that, and it's the only way I've seen that you really avoid covert contracts. So Glover's wife refers to these episodes as victim pukes. If you notice, we've talked about victim pukes often, and a victim puke is when a guy gives his field report, but it's not actually his story. It's just a list of grievances. And you can usually tell this because of the pronouns the guys use in their field reports. So for a guy who's victim puking, it's always she. You can almost count them. And as soon as it crosses that 30% mark, 30% she's, you can tell he's still knee deep in her frame, built up these covert contracts, and he's basically at level 3 of the victim triangle. So a lot of times, I think Wine More Please even made it a bannable offense after like the first victim puke to mention too many she statements. Ideally, you want to get completely everything within your own frame. I. It's a really good way to recognize frame when you see the guy treating himself as his own point of view in his life story. It's like a narrative thing. If you're making it from your own perspective, if you're describing things from your own perspective, then at least you know the guy is thinking in terms of frame, in terms of himself, and making himself his own mental point of origin. Guaranteed, you go, let's just use Twitter for an example, because everybody here has Twitter. You go to Twitter, and you find everybody talking about how bad the woman is, and how horrible they are, without any mention of themselves at all. That's that triangle right there, and they're knee-deep in the anger phase. Oh, that probably killed the volume here. Yeah, so the goal can't be her. And it's not one of those, you got to do it for yourself, bro. It's not that. It's just if you make the goal about her, she's going to sabotage it. So whether or not it's good or it's bad, it just doesn't work. I'm using some examples of other guys, but I gave enough examples. I don't think we need to notice this. So truly becoming selfish. So since nice guys learn to sacrifice themselves in order to survive, recovery must center on learning to put themselves first and making their needs a priority. There's a great post by one of the other moderators. I want to say it was Scorchzang, but I'll have to check. It's called Why You're Lost. Feel free to look it up after this. And for a lot of guys, they don't really know what they're doing. It's a bit of a bait and switch, like we're telling them what to do in hopes that they figure it out as they go. But he kind of spelled it out. And what we're doing here is we're building rational egoism in guys, or what you would call in the Nietzschean sense, the master morality. Things that are good for me are moral, and things that are not good for me are immoral, essentially. And it's desperately needed. Let's face it. I always like making the joke. It's not really feminism's fault. They're just riding the coattails of it. But I always joke that feminism had 3 generations to show modern men how to act in the modern society, and they failed miserably. That first round of divorces raised a bunch of guys that were codependent and needy because the mothers and women in their lives raised them to be horrible people. And all the reasons that we've talked about here. Those generation of men ended up being kind of broken women along with their wives, even if they were together, kind of repeated the cycle. As you notice, it's kind of getting worse and worse and worse each time. And you're essentially... So all those things that Rollo talks about, where it's a war on gender or taking the man out of the scenario, it all kind of stems from this. And it's not because they're waging a war and we're losing. It's because guys are losing the part of themselves that makes them attractive and fully functional social human beings. And the more of it they lose, the more they don't even recognize that they need it. And so the less this stuff seems to matter. And that's why you're just seeing a whole lot of removal of masculinity from society. I mean, we live in a society. Moving on here. So he poses a challenge. In a session of one of my No More Mr. Nice Guy men's groups, I challenged each group to experiment with putting themselves first for at least a week. Through the challenge, it created tremendous anxiety for all the men, and each decided to accept it. The experiences of the 3, Lars, Reese, and Shane, were presented below. So Lars... he went home after the group and told his wife that he was going to make his needs a priority for the following week. Do not do this. Don't tell your wife what you're doing. Don't talk about it. Don't seek validation from her. He's already screwed it up here. She will assume it's fake because it most likely is fake. And from his side, he's given what's called like the New Year resolution thing, where as soon as you talk about this, you get that dopamine rush as if you've already done it, which actually disincentivizes you to actually do it. So keep your mouth shut. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about Fight Club is there for a reason. It's not because it's hidden. It's not because it's embarrassing. It's because you'll screw it up if you open your stupid mouth. So STFU. So Lars decided to keep it simple. His plan for the week involved making time every day to go to the gym and work out. Again, first level of dread. Before the kids were born, he'd been physically active. The demands put an end to all that. He decided to alternate his workouts before and after work. When he shared his plan with his wife, she applied a little guilt. I would say a little as being, what's the opposite of hyperbolic? Definitely downplayed. That's not fair that you get to work out and I don't. He was tempted to back down. He had an impulse to try and find a solution so his wife could work out too. Instead, he reflected her concern and told her he was going to work out anyway. So when he uses the word reflected here, I would assume he's talking about fogging. Now, if you haven't seen this before, we have 3 tools that we talk about for boundary enforcement with some 4th and 5th, but we'll pin those for now. Agree and amplify, amuse mastery, and fogging. In this case, fogging is what they call like a mental jujitsu. So if a girl's expressing her emotions at you, again, everything stems from her ego, you reflect those back. Well, I don't get to go to the gym and you do. I can see how you'd feel that way. It's 2-pronged. First prong is it shows that her feelings are valid, and girls, when they emote, always want some validation for it. But it doesn't acknowledge them as real in your world, but it doesn't deny them either. Think of it like a keto. You just take their energy, throw it back at them. Yeah, I can see how you would feel that way. It validates their feelings, it calms the situation, and it gets you out of there without having to make concessions. And that's really what he's trying not to do here, because he's trying to be more selfish and take his own needs first. During his first couple trips, he was overwhelmed with guilt and anxiety. Nevertheless, he persevered. On the 3rd day, the wife actually asked how the workout went. Started to become more energized, blah, blah, blah. Basically, things went well. Reese, second one. His habit on the weekends was to go out with his latest boyfriend to the bars on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. By Monday, he was exhausted. He would spend the rest of the week playing catch-up. So he decided for one weekend, he would put himself first and do what he wanted to do. Told his boyfriend in advance, decided he'd go out just one night, not drink, and be in by midnight. On Saturday, he went to go see a movie with some friends. Sunday, he stayed home. When Monday came, he felt rested and clear-headed at work. His boyfriend hadn't dropped him, and the rest of the week productive and enjoyable. The takeaway for this one, and I cannot stress this enough, is guys have no shortage of overestimation of the consequences of them not taking their wife's feelings into account. Everything a guy won't do that is very obvious. His friends will all tell him, dude, don't let her do this, don't do this. He's like, yeah, but I can't do that. And they always get vague when it comes to the consequences. But really the worst consequence is a girl will leave you. Now, if your relationship is so bad off that you going to the gym 3 times a week is enough for a girl to leave you, it's already dead. And all you're doing is you stop lying to yourselves. So test these boundaries. You're going to find very quickly how many things you can do and how selfish you can be in your life without alienating the people around you. Again, if you're one of these nice guy types who's so worried about abandonment and that limbic brain section of you there, once you understand how small and inconsequential things are, it really gives you the freedom to act in your own best interests, which makes you, and here, let's make it altruistic. It puts you in the best position possible to help those around you. It's literally the analogy of putting on your own mask before putting on the people around you. Anyways, last one is Shane. He tried to do things for his girlfriend. He gave her gifts, planned surprises, did whatever he could. His plan would involve paying attention to when she had an impulse to do something for her, and whenever he felt the impulse, he would instead do something for himself. So instead of buying her a purse, he bought himself a purse. Good for him. When he thought about washing her car, he washed his own. When he felt the urge to buy her a gift, he bought himself a gift. When he wanted to call just to see if she was okay, he called somebody else instead, like a friend or whatever. All this created tremendous anxiety for Shane. Anxiety has genetic roots. Anxiety is our fight or flight response, kind of muted at this point because, no bears are hunting us down in our condominiums. But the problem with anxiety now is the same reason we have problems with chocolate cake. Our brains are hardwired to search out simple carbs because we need the energy. When we were cavemen, calories were scarce, and any source you could get, you'd take it. So what it used to be, you'd have to chew on a sugarcane root for an hour to get, 100 calories. We've since been able to create chocolate cake from refined sugar. So you can get 1,000 calories in like a minute with no jaw chewing whatsoever. And the problem with that is our instinct of our hardwiring for sugar has created diabetes in modern man. And that's how our instincts can work against us. In this case, this is a form of sexual diabetes. That anxiety you have because you're putting your needs first is fight or flight based on abandonment. And it's just not healthy now. I can't break it down any more than that. And I'll skip the rest because, it worked out well for him. And that's the point. Sometimes it's just a matter of acclimatizing yourself to these things and practicing them in a deliberate way, even if they're stupid examples. So for guys who are having relationship problems, and let's say you found your covert contracts and you've dealt with them, the next step, rational egoism. What's in it for me? And I like framing it kind of easily. Just anything you do, what's in it for me? Anything somebody wants from you, what's in it for me? If you can't answer that question, then just don't do it and let the consequences fall where they may. If you remember before, I already said to consider your relationship dead. The girl is gone and you're just keeping her there as a sparring partner. So once you understand you're not actually losing anything, you're not getting abandoned, it's already happened, and now you're just dealing with the fallout. It makes you much better equipped to handle these things without screwing yourself over by listening to your own stupid brain and your own stupid thoughts. So anyways, that's it for this one. It's pretty straightforward. We're going to do chapter 5. I'm not sure when. I see a lot of you guys in the chat talking about a lot of stuff. I hope I didn't miss any super chats. No, it looks good. So I don't know when I'm going to put episode 5 out yet, but it's good. I like seeing in the chat right now. So you guys are all kind of reinforcing it or talking amongst each other, swapping notes. That's red pill stuff in a nutshell. So anyways, I'm very glad you guys have enjoyed it this far. So take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.